welcome to the Open Mic Comedy Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. This podcast exists for everybody on the Open Mic Comedy circuit, whether you're a comedian, an MC, a promoter, or a tutor. Even comedy fans who enjoy watching stars of the future in the pub basements around the world. If you're thinking I could do that and want to get involved, then this podcast will guide you on what to expect on this crazy circuit from those right in the middle of it. Today's guest is someone who has done wonders for the Essex education system. They can spot the next England manager from within a crowd of comedians. And please don't get us started on Essex dads. Please welcome to the stage, it's Amber Phillips.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
No problem. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yes, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, I'm all good. Like I was saying just before we came on, like I'm really glad that the sound is working because I literally had like outside my house, we've got the worst potholes ever. And like they've been there for like 2 years and been fine. And then about 20 minutes before we're due to record this, like the entire cast of like Bob the Builder basically came and set up outside my window to fix the potholes. So they've gone now, thank goodness. So yeah, it's fine. But I was panicking for a bit thinking it's absolutely typical. Like, you know, they've been there for 2 years and the one time I need quiet, they turn up. But anyway, so all good, all good.
We'll see if they come along at any point soon, but knowing local councils, one and done, and that's it, they're gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even know what they're putting in them to fix them, to be fair. I don't know. So
probably mud.
Yeah. They've probably gone and dug up some holes in another road and then come to fill in mine. So that's how it works, right?
Yeah, something like that. That was quite good, actually. Quite enjoyed. That's probably quite a good thing to put into a set.
I will write it down. I've got a pen at the ready. There we go.
So how long have you been doing comedy and how did you get into it all?
This is sort of a tricky one because I did like 3 gigs before COVID, and it's always the thing of like, do you count them or not? But basically I've been going like, it's just coming up to about 5 years. I did about sort of like literally 3 gigs before COVID, and then COVID happened, and then I was kind of doing like Zoom gigs and things like that. But my like getting started, my first gig, I ended up doing basically because I'd always wanted to try stand-up. It was one of those things I'd kind of seen stand-up on TV and things like that, or I'd seen it, you know, in a theatre and thought, God, those people are really clever. I always sort of looked at stand-up comedians as people who are like really clever and like in charge of the room. And I'd always wanted to sort of be that clever person in the room, I guess. But I was very quiet at school. I was a very quiet and shy person. I wasn't like the class clown. I know you get like people say, I was a class clown. Yeah. I was not. I was the very sort of quiet, studious, nerdy person. So it wasn't really like my domain. So I kind of had it in the back of my mind for a long time that I wanted to do stand-up, never really had the guts to do it. I used to watch loads of it and kind of analyze it in my mind, but I'd never do it.
Yeah. I
used to write quite a lot. So I wrote before I performed, really. And I wrote for what was then Newsjack on Radio 4. So I wrote a few jokes and they got on.
Okay.
And that was really cool. So that kind of gave me a confidence boost. And then from that, I kept writing jokes and kind of sending them to podcasts, sending them to shows. And the thing that kind of tipped me actually into performing was I wrote some jokes and they got accepted for a show. And then when I heard the jokes back on the show, I kind of heard them and thought, no, that's not how I would deliver them. That's not how I would say them. And then the more I thought about it, I thought, well, why don't I say the jokes? I'm already writing the jokes. Why don't I say them as well?
Yeah.
So that kind of kicked me into like doing stand-up, and I basically booked like a 1-day comedy workshop close to where I live and went and did that just as something fun to do and thought I can do it once. If I'm rubbish at it, don't do it again. And then off the back of that, the guy running that basically said to me, oh, I run an open mic night, you know, on a Sunday, come down and do it. You should come and do a 5-minute set. And I went and did that, and it was like something just clicked, and I was like, right, I'm going to keep going. And so off I went. So that was the start of it, really.
Okay. The course enabled you to get on stage and gave you that little bit of a nudge, but there's always been that kind of inkling that you want to be up there. And when you say you were you weren't the class clown or anything else, has there been people from like the early part of your life who've then looked at you doing this now and gone, I'm shocked that this is you?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, like, I remember the first time I kind of said out loud that I would like to do comedy was when I was probably about 14, I think, 13 or 14. And I remember having a conversation with one of my friends at school, and we were talking about something. And I turned to her, and we were talking about comedy, I think, and I turned to her and said, like, do you think I'd be a good comedian? And she sort of looked at me, and I remember she kind of looked me up and down, and she went, no. She said, she said, no. She said, you're too nice. She said, like, you're too quiet and you're too nice. Yeah. I was like the sensible person. So I kind of had that label, I guess. But yeah. And like, even now, I mean, like in my family and in my circle of friends, they kind of accept it now. But when I first sort of told them, they were like, really? You? Why would you want to do that? It just didn't make sense to them at all. But I don't know. It was always one of those things in the back of my mind that I wanted to do. And I think it was just a case of, I will try it and see what happens. Yeah.
But I guess the reaction from when those people that weren't sure that'd be the right thing for you to do and come and see you perform are probably kind of like their head's been blown apart.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, yeah, it's quite a funny thing because even like, for example, like I'm not particularly like sweary on stage. I swear a little bit, but I'm not like the sweariest comedian. And it's even like things like my family will come to see me and I'll use like 1 or 2 swear words and they're shocked that I swear. And it's so funny. And you can literally see them in the audience. I'm surprised they haven't sort of stood up yet and gone, Amber, stop, like it you know, you feel like they're going to sort of tell you off. But yeah, it's quite funny. I think they're getting their heads around it now. They're used to it now, and they just kind of let me do my thing.
Yeah.
But, I mean, like, what was it like for you when you first kind of told people that you do it? What was the reaction for you?
I did a course, and my course was like 7 or 8 weeks, and I didn't tell anybody I was doing it other than my wife. And the only reason I told my wife was because I thought if I go out on a Thursday into London for 7 or 8 weeks in a row, she's going to get suspicious that I'm up to something no good.
Yeah.
So I had to tell her, but I didn't tell my kids. My kids are like older.
Yeah.
Didn't tell them. I didn't tell any friends. A week before the showcase, I dropped a message to I think my brother, about 3 or 4 other friends, and said, I'm doing a stand-up thing here next Wednesday. If you want to come and watch, tickets are a £5. Here's the link. And everyone's like, what?
Yeah.
And I only told those people. I didn't tell a lot of people. And then I did it. And then I put up a post on Facebook afterwards, just like, I did this last night. And the shock from people was just like, that's not you. That's how. It's quite funny though, because then you get people come to see you and they go, that was actually all right.
Yeah. It's that word actually, isn't it? They go, you're quite good actually. And that's the most backhanded compliment, isn't it? But you think, I'll take that, but thanks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You just hope that you were the one that when you did yours, you performed okay and you didn't have a stinker of a night.
Yeah, no,
because
exactly.
I think we've all had stinkers, absolute.
Yes.
Can you remember your worst?
Oh.
Or your general worst gig?
Oh, now I was thinking about this. Now, this is the interesting thing, right? So, and I think hopefully this is a sign of progress. So I used to think the worst thing that could happen at a gig, I used to think the worst thing you could get was like apathy from the audience. I used to think that was like the worst reaction you could have. That was like the worst way you could like die a death on stage. And then I gigged a bit more and realised actually apathy is not the worst thing. You can get like active hostility, which is worse. So, I mean, luckily I haven't had much of that. There's sort of 2 quite bad gigs I had back to back. So I don't really have like one. I had one that was like it was a gong show. It's quite a well-known gong show. And I'd never done a gong before, went and did it. And like before I went, everybody had kind of said to me, that gong show's fun. That's a fun one to do. That was the word they kept using. They go, oh, that's fun. And it's like, it was fun in the same way that it's fun getting mauled by a bear. Like it's like it was kind of like, for me, I mean, this kind of probably answers the question. I'm not sure gong shows are for me. It was something I've done and I've tried, and I don't know. It felt like I couldn't give the material and myself the space to actually do my thing properly. It kind of felt a bit. You do feel like a sort of a gladiator in the ring, and I'm not a gladiator, so I'm not a gladiator. So basically, I did this gong show, and I was so nervous. It was that thing where I was so nervous that I started making like stupid mistakes because you're like really nervous. So I did a terrible job at this gong, got gonged off pretty much straight away. came home, and I genuinely thought about quitting stand-up then. That's like the one gig I've had where I came back and thought, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing that? So that wasn't a good gig. And then I was like, okay, on to the next one. And then I had to gig the next week that I had to travel for. And I decided to sort of go for the weekend and like make a weekend of it. And it was kind of out in the sticks. I thought I'll go and stay in like a nice hotel and do like a weekend away. So I did that and went to this gig, and but bearing in mind I'd just had like a stinker at the Gong the week before, I'd sort of gone into this second gig going, okay, just like have a nice time. I hope this is a nice one, just have a nice time. And I got to this gig, and it was one of those ones where it was like, it's all the things that they say you shouldn't do to set up a room for a gig. It was like the bar was in the room with everything, and it was like a bar that had like a great big glass shop window, and you're performing like in front of the window, so everyone in the street is walking behind you, and all this kind of thing. And basically it was a room of about 40 people, but I would say 35 of them were not there for comedy. So there were 5 people who were very keen, and they were like in the front row. And then the 35 people behind them were just trying to get to the bar and have a drink, really. Yeah. So you were basically trying to perform to the 5 people at the front who were paying attention, while you've got like the cacophony of 35 people drinking behind them. And it wasn't great. And basically, I didn't even get that far into my set, right? I was doing like the Essex dad joke that we'll probably talk about in a bit. So I came on, and my first line is like, I'm from Essex. And that normally, occasionally, you'll get someone go, oh, I'm from there, I'm from Essex, and then you kind of have a chat with them. And so I said this line, I'm from Essex. Someone at the back shouted, really? And I said, yes. And then I won't repeat what he said, because I think it probably won't pass the clean filter. So basically, he made a proposition of a sexual nature. Right. I basically sort of stood there and thought, did he actually just say that? Like in a room full of people out loud, he said that. Yeah. And the front row were kind of looking at me like, what are you doing? They were kind of on the fence about me at that point. I hadn't really done anything. And they were kind of looking at me like, how are you going to handle this? And because he kind of said this really horrible thing, I thought, like, because I didn't want to sort of give him the time of day to make him think that he was funny. Like, I know you get that sometimes with hecklers where they're trying to help you, and you can sort of bounce off them, and you have to kind of doff your cap if they say something funny. What this guy had said was just kind of horrendous, and it wasn't funny at all. It just sort of basically like ruined the room. And I kind of thought, well, I didn't really know what to say. I kind of thought, well, I don't want to make him think that he is adding to the night by saying stuff like this. Yeah. So all I did when he kind of said this really horrible thing, he said, can I this? And I basically just sort of looked him in the eye and just went, no, and just left it. I just went, no, and just, silent. I didn't sort of come back with anything else, because I thought, I'm going to make him sit in that awkwardness. I don't want him thinking that he has added to this show by saying that. I want him to feel the awkwardness and be embarrassed and shut up, basically. Yeah. And that didn't happen. Okay. he didn't shut up. And he then just started like a whole slew of like sexist abuse basically back at me on the stage. And I was just sort of still standing there going, right, what do I do? Because I still haven't been performing for very long at that point. Like, luckily, I say luckily, because he was so horrible, I think it convinced the people who were at the front, the 5 people who were there for comedy, I think it actually kind of tipped them into my favour. Yes. Like they weren't sure at that point about me, but because this guy had been so horrible to me, they kind of went, okay, she doesn't deserve that, leave her alone. Yeah. And they kind of jumped to my defense. So basically, I kind of, that in a way, it sort of helped me, him being a bit of an arse, because it kind of tipped the people who were on the fence over to my side of the fence. But it was weird. It was a very weird show to do. And I did it and came away, and I went back to my hotel, and I just thought, like, okay, so my gig before this, I absolutely died. Yeah. This gig, I've just had someone just chuck a load of abuse at me, and I just thought, what the hell? And it was one of those things, like that second gig, if I'd had that maybe a year before, I probably would have like burst into tears and gone, what the hell am I doing? Yeah. Because I'd had the Gong the week before as like a marker of like a really bad gig, I kind of just sat there and kind of laughed. I just thought, I've had like 2 really bad gigs on the trot, and I just thought, like, what the hell am I doing? And I just ended up, I remember like sitting on my bed just kind of laughing. I think I went into sort of like a sort of hysterical laughter of like this is just, that gig was bad, but still not quite as bad as the gong I did the week before. In my mind, I just kind of thought, wow. And it was just a very odd kind of evening. I ended up sitting like in my hotel room, and because I had nothing to do, I was like, right, I make myself a cup of tea and I put the TV on. And it was because it was out in the sticks. They had all like those weird like regional TV shows, weird TV channels, back of the field live or something. It's like something really weird. And so I was flicking through the channels at like 3 a.m. thinking, right, what do I watch before I go to bed? And the only thing they had on this regional like TV channel was Wurzel Gummidge. Like as in like the original like 1970s Wurzel Gummidge. And I remember sitting there like on my bed with a cup of tea watching Wurzel Gummidge at 3 a.m. thinking, what is this? What is my life? What am I doing? So yeah, I would say probably I've had like 2 bad gigs, but I think having them together made me realise actually, it could be worse. There are different kinds of bad. If that makes sense.
You mentioned about that kind of made you think about quitting. Yeah. How close would you say you actually came to that? Was it a case it's an hour or something, or was it one of those where it plays on your mind until the next gig?
Yeah, it's that kind of thing. So yeah, I think for a couple of days, I kind of thought about it. I just thought like, what am I doing? But then I had this other gig booked in, and so I was kind of thinking, okay, see how the next one goes, and see what happens. And then that turned into a bit of a mess. But it was kind of a funny mess. I just kind of came away from it going, do you know what? Like, what the hell? It's just that's just spectacularly unlucky to have 2 back to back. And then I think after that, because I was like, I need like a nice gig, I need one that's really nice, I think I booked straight in to do G&B after that one, because I was like, I need a nice friendly one that I know and love. So I was like, right, I'm going back to G&B. I need to like restore my confidence. So I did that, and then that brought me back up, I think. So yeah, G&B is one of my absolute favorites that you've talked about before on here. But yeah, so that's one of those things. I think like I had to just sort of go, okay, right, just do a nice one, do a nice gig, and that would sort of bring you back up. Yeah.
So how many gigs had you done up to that point when you when things weren't great?
I'm not sure of the number. I was about 2 years in. So numbers wise, I'm not really sure. I was sort of not like brand new, but I still had to kind of, learn a lot. It was that point where you're okay with nice audiences, but you then have to start learning to deal with people when they're a bit leery or a bit, if they're kind of misbehaving. So that was when I was probably about 2 years in, I think.
So how many gigs have you done now, roughly?
Oh, I've done. So I did my 100th gig last year at G&B. I'm on about 150-ish.
Okay.
Ish, yeah. I try and gig as regularly as I can. Sometimes I'll do them like in a clump and then have a break. Sometimes I try and do one a week. But I'm about sort of 150-ish mark at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things, isn't it? Is working out. I think Kyle mentioned this on his episode, was that the best thing you can do is do them as close together as possible. Mm-hmm. But it's one of those things is that sometimes if you've got a partner or whatever and say, I'm out 4 nights this week and I'm out 4 nights next week, their immediate thought is, what?
Yeah.
What? You're doing every, But then I'm off. I'm not doing anything for 2 weeks after that. And that somehow doesn't feel as great as saying, just a couple nights here and a couple nights there and a couple nights there. But then you realize your progress is kind of halted a bit on some of it. Yeah. But it's finding that balance between the home life, the comedy life, the work life, because I've found, I'm sure a lot of other people have, is that comedy life is very involving. You can't just put it down. Mm-hmm. If you put it down for a period of time and then you come back to it and you come back and do a gig and it doesn't go well, you go, I was unprepared.
Yeah.
And then you kind of think to yourself, if I'm not prepared for this, why am I doing it? So trying to, even in those downtimes, you're probably still trying to force yourself to write or memorize bits or get bits going in your head and stuff like that. So the moment you do hit the stage, because I've done it so many times where I go on stage and it doesn't go well and you kind of go, that was my own fault. I've got no one else to blame. That was my own fault. And you know why. You need to then fix that why and not hope that it's going to fix itself next time.
Yeah.
It happens
is
a
like
bit.
That. Yeah, it's like that because I equate it to, because I speak languages as well, and like I always equate it to like when you learn a language that you have to keep it going. It's like a muscle you have to keep, like, you know, like comedy muscles. It's like a muscle that you have to keep in shape, and you have to keep practicing and keep it in shape. If you go like 3 months without doing a gig, when you come back, of course you're going to be rusty. Of course you're not going to remember things. Of course you're not going to know how to take the mic out of the stand. You haven't done it for 3 months. And it's kind of the same like when you speak a language, or like, you know, if you equate it to like exercise and going to the gym. If you don't go to the gym for like 3 months and then go back to the gym again, it's going to feel rubbish. You're going to be oh God, I'm really out of shape. It's the same thing. You have to kind of keep a certain amount of like fitness, like comedy fitness, as it were, to kind of, you know, be on a level. And it is tricky. It's one of those things. Like I've started to get like almost like I don't know if it's the same for you. I get like a sort of a spidey sense of like when I've gone too long without a gig, and I'm like, right, I need to book another one in. You're like, it's like you almost like itchy feet. You sort of go, no, I need to book some in now. I've been off for quite a while. So it's trying to keep that balance, of like home life, but then also going, right, I need to keep this vaguely at a level so I don't get too out of shape.
Yeah, Christmas is a weird time for that, because when everything shuts down for a couple of weeks, and I remember in the run up to Christmas in 2024, I think I had 3 gigs in that week leading up to Christmas, which was like my final round out. And then 2 of them got cancelled. So I was left with 1 gig. And I did that 1 gig and it went really well. And then I didn't gig again for another 3 weeks. And the moment I came back, it was just like an absolute car crash and a mess. And you're just like, there we go.
Yeah.
Prepare better and it will be better. If you don't prepare and you don't perform to your best, you'll regret it straight after, because you haven't had fun at the end of the day. If you've had fun on a stage, the idea is the audience has the fun as well. But if you know you've had fun, you can come away with something. But if you've not had fun, the audience hasn't had fun, you've kind of like just wasted an evening of your life.
Yeah, you kind of think, what was the point of that? Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's certain gigs that I've done and I've very much gone, like if it's like just post-Christmas. I mean, like my first gig back after Christmas, I call it like the sort of the blowing off the cobwebs gig. And like it's that thing of you're just going and you kind of set like zero expectation apart from I'm just getting back into like it's almost like the muscle memory and, you know, the rhythm of doing it. Yeah, exactly. And you kind of have to go and go, okay, we're going to have fun. And you kind of treat it almost like it's like new material, that sort of thing. You're going, I know I've got something. It might not be perfectly polished, but we're going to go and have fun with it and sort of do our best with it. And the first gig back is a bit like that. It's kind of, like the sort of blowing off the cobwebs kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about, we'll go on to positives then. Best gigs you've had.
Best gigs. As I go, luckily, you know, generally my gigs are getting better and better, and I keep going, oh, that was a good one. Actually, that was a good one. I mean, like my 100th gig at G&B was really special. That was a really nice one to do. And it was lovely to do that in that room, because I think like G&B, I first did when I was literally like 2 or 3 gigs in. I think G&B was one. I did the Royal George, and it was like my 3rd ever gig that I'd done. And that was like turned out to be the last gig before COVID, basically. Right. I did like G&B at the Royal George, and then like everything shut. But I remember my first G&B gig going, I remember like as I was leaving thinking, oh, this is a special club. I like this one. But so coming back there to do my 100th at the Royal George again for G&B was really nice. That was like a really nice full circle moment. So that was a really nice one. In terms of like other gigs I've done, one that I did that I was sort of surprised by, like I was sort of like, it turned out to be like a really good surprise, was I did one, because I gig sometimes like in London and sometimes outside of it. I had a gig in Kent where like it was a booker. I was doing like an open spot on the bill. I was doing like an open tent, and it was one of those bookers where they give you like a location and a date, but they don't give you like the exact venue until like the day before.
Okay.
So I was kind of booked to do this, and I was like, okay, I've got to go to this town on this day, but I knew nothing about the venue until the day before. And the day before, I got like a message of like the final details. It's like being a spy. It was like, you know, we will drop off the information, you know, the day before. So I got like the address the day before, and like based on the address, I was thinking, oh God, I was thinking this is going to be like no offense, but it's going to be like a church hall with like 3 people and a meat raffle at the end. That was kind of my impression based on like where it was and what they said the night was going to be like. And I was like, oh my God, what is it going to be? And I was like, well, I'm going to go anyway. And I turned up, and it turned out it wasn't a church hall. It was a 200-seater theatre. And I was like, I was checking, like, have I got the right address? I am in the right place, right? And they're like, yeah. And like the other people on the bill turned up, and I thought, wow, okay, I haven't actually played a room this big, and I haven't done like a proper theatre stage before, so this is going to be fun. And sort of panic slightly took over, because I thought, like, I'm used to like pub basements. What do I do? But it went well, thank goodness. I went out there and it got laughs, and and they sounded loud in the room, and I thought, oh my God. So that was a really nice experience that I wasn't expecting. So that was like a highlight in terms of I came in thinking this was going to be like a pub or a church hall, and it wasn't. So that was like a pleasant surprise. So yeah, there's been sort of gigs where I've been like, I would say, it's been like a bad surprise, and then there have been some that have been like a good surprise, but they even out. I would say the vast majority of my gigs are lovely. I'm not gonna moan. The vast majority of my gigs are absolutely lovely and a delight. I think it's like anything where you get 2% of them are terrible, 2% of them are like off the face of the earth amazing, and then a lot of them in the middle are like just nice, really fun ones to do.
So you've got me intrigued about this with the whole, it's the gig is in this town on this day. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it was someone, and I don't know if they actually still book things anymore, but it was a thing where they kind of send out like a mailing list, and they basically say like, we've got this town on this day, and you kind of go, all right, okay, I can get to there. And then like nearer the day, they kind of give you like the full address and like the call times and things like that. But yeah, it was a little bit, it did feel like you were sort of a Cold War spy. It's kind of, you get half the information now, and then you get the other half later on. It was quite funny. But yeah, so that was quite a pleasant surprise, that one. Sort of based on the address, you sort of thought, what am I doing? Where am I going? And then when you got there, it's like this massive room, it had like proper like flip down chairs, Mark. It was like proper posh. I was like, oh my God. And yeah, it was really funny. So that was like a pleasant surprise. But I think also, like, in terms of describing what is a good gig and what's not, you can have a gig that's like really small but a really lovely room to play. You can have like a and you've probably had this as well, like gigs where there's maybe like 20 people, 15 or 20 people in, but they're really having a good time.
Yeah.
You can have gigs that are bigger, but actually some people are like at the back chatting, or they just want to go get a drink and things like that. So the size of the audience doesn't equate to whether it's going to be nice or not to do, and whether you enjoy it or not.
There's certain comedy, like you said, certain comedy room layouts that just you see them and you think they're not going to work. Like if in your instance, where if you've got 5 there and 35 that aren't there for comedy, if those 35 there then turn ahead and go, actually, this is quite good.
Yeah.
The room's changed and the whole night and the vibe's completely changed. But it needs a lot for those nights to flip around. But when they flip around, I think they're hugely entertaining. But there's still almost nothing worse than performing in just front of comics.
Yeah, that it can be hard. It can be hard doing that. And it's kind of, you have to kind of size up the audience that you've got there, and then go, right, okay, so based on the audience, what can I do? You have to sort of work the room that you've got, don't you? So yeah, when you go to a gig and it's mainly comics, again, quite often I will sort of go, okay, especially if it's a gig that I've done quite a lot and I know the comedians in that room and I know they've heard my material God knows how many times. You think, right, okay, so I'm not going to do like a standard set tonight, because I think there's no point. I think it's going to be a waste of time. So you use it, I tend to use it either for like some new ideas, kind of off the cuff, or try and do a bit of crowd work stuff, like talking to people or something.
Yeah.
You have to sort of work with the room that you've got and get the best out of the room that you've got. That's the thing.
So have you gone into doing stuff like MCing and stuff like that? Yeah.
No, that's one of those things. I would like to try it. I guess everyone says, oh yeah, I want to MC and I want to do this. I would like to try it. I guess you've got to be an MC. It's kind of a status thing, isn't it? Like you've got to come across as quite high status to pull it off a lot of the time. It's like sort of being, like sort of the teacher in the classroom kind of thing. Yeah, I'd like to try it one time, maybe. It's like being the host of a party, isn't it? Where you're constantly running around doing stuff and you don't really get to enjoy yourself so much because you're looking out for everyone else. So
yeah, I find it very difficult sometimes because there's the tasks of like bringing the audience up if an act hasn't been great. There's tasks of bringing the audience down if the act has been too great for the next one. So everyone's kind of starts on an even keel. There's also knowing how much you can do when you're on stage and what you do on stage, because you start to soon realize that everything you do affects everything else around you. And it does come with quite a bit of responsibility, but it's fun to do. If you can get the opportunity to do it, I'd always say at least try it. Even if you tried putting on like a local night for yourself or whatever with a few people and make yourself the MC and see how that goes and have some fun with it. But it's definitely a different skill set that I think helps in stand-up in general.
Yeah.
But it's quite hard to get MC spots around, isn't it? Because most people MC their own nights.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's then you go into the territory of I'll set up my own night, and then that's sort of a whole other kettle of fish, isn't it? But
never easy.
It's something I would like to try. It's the sort of thing maybe I'd put on like a comedy night as a one-off and see how it went. I know lots of people who've done it once and then they've kind of gone like never again. So I don't know. I would try it. I would certainly try it. I mean, like I think you're absolutely right, like in terms of MCing being a particular skill set. And the person at the moment that I watch, and like I watch everything she puts on Instagram and I just love what she does. And who is like a brilliant MC that I would recommend everybody watch is Laura Lex at the Comedy Store. She is amazing at managing, she does the Comedy Store on like a Friday or Saturday night.
Yeah.
She is amazing at handling that room. And she puts on her Instagram, she's got videos that she puts up where she's MCing and she analyzes what she's doing, like in the comments and things like that. And she tells you, I can see this person over here and they're not really paying attention. I'm not going to talk to them for the moment, but I will come back to them. And she kind of tells you, like, as the video's going on, she kind of like tells you her thought process while she's on stage, what she's thinking and like when she approaches people and things like that. And so I think like I just love everything that she does. So I would recommend that to people anyway, go and find Laura Lex on social media and watch her clips that she puts out, because like if you want to learn to MC, she is one of the top people I think at the moment who's actually explaining like how to do it and what she does.
It's like a director's commentary kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds really interesting. I've not heard of her, so I'm definitely going to be looking her up.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. Duncan Hart here from episode 37. If you're enjoying this podcast, give it a like, a 5-star rating, and a follow on whatever app you're using right now. Mark will be forever grateful. Now, back to this cracking episode.
With regards to the open mic circuit then, nothing is perfect in this world.
No.
So what would you like to see change on it?
Yeah. Again, a couple of things. I'm sorry. Every time you ask a question, I'm like, can I say 2 things rather than one? So I get it down to 2. So like one of the things that often comes up, and I think you've mentioned it probably quite a few times on here before, is like women in comedy. I'd like to see more women, not just on the open mic circuit, but like progressing as well. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I see so many women on the circuit all the time. And I know there are people who go, there just aren't women on the circuit. They're not there. They are there.
Yeah.
And I see them all the time. And I know so many brilliant women who are doing it and they're going around the circuit doing their thing. I would like to see more progression, I think, for them. Yeah, generally seeing more women sort of running nights, more women progressing and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's one thing. Another thing, on a slightly more flippant note, is more afternoon gigs, actually, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, because like G&B, like Star of Kings on a Sunday, that's a really nice one to do. And I know the general wisdom is that, comedy doesn't work in the daytime. It's a nighttime thing. You've got to be in like a dark room and, it's this kind of after hours vibe and, people lose their inhibitions in the evening. I think you can have a perfectly good time in the afternoon. I think. Yeah. Like on a weekend afternoon, like a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon. Because also it's a different vibe, I think, as well. You get a different vibe, like afternoon comedy. I think you're still in quite a relaxed headspace, but it's not the sort of the dark corners kind of vibe that you get sometimes.
I think there's more themed nights coming out now, and I don't mean like all male or female bills and race and all of that. I mean, I think it's Backyard do a comedy night which is alcohol free.
Yeah.
Or a comedy, it might be a comedy afternoon. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure there's like a babies and comedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thing going on as well. So I agree. Afternoon, I mean, I'm coming from this from somebody who's getting on in years. Yeah. It's nice getting home early.
It is. I think there is a growing demand for it, and people are starting to recognise it. Because like you say, there's like alcohol-free things, there's like bring your own baby things. People have started doing daytime raves now. They're like, rather than club nights, it's like afternoon rave and, and like home by 9 and all this kind of thing. I think there is a demand for it, and people actually are up for it and would do it. I think there's actually quite a few people that would go, do you know what? I want to go and see comedy at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, be home by 8 or 9. I think that's, and you can do it without feeling, worse for wear the next day. I think there is a space for that, and I think there is a demand for it. Yeah.
Yeah, because if I ever go to the theatre, I always look for the matinees, the first one I look at.
Yeah.
Just like, go see the matinee at 2 o'clock, have some dinner after and go home. And I also think that if comedy was more earlier in the day, it gives comedians much more of a time to network as well.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, you go to a gig, you say hello to people beforehand, you'll chat to them for the 10, 15 minutes in the break. And then after, everybody's shooting off to get a train or a tube or a bus.
Yeah. And I think also it kind of links back to like the women in comedy thing again slightly, because like I think a lot of the reason people say, oh, I don't see women at gigs so much, they are there. I think that's also a factor though, like to consider, like especially like women and their safety. A lot of women, like traveling late at night, it's the thing of traveling late at night, getting a train late at night, walking places late at night, walking around the city late at night. If you've got an afternoon gig, that's obviously not as much of a concern. I think it would help women, but I think it would help people in general. But I think it's, the sort of late night getting home aspect is something that people don't consider quite so much. And actually it can be a barrier to people. It can be for whatever reason, whether it's, like a safety issue or, it doesn't have to be like a gender thing. It can just be, actually, I don't fancy going out that late at night, things like that. I think, there's room for it. And like for networking, it helps. I think it gives you more time and more space to do things without, you're not having to sort of constantly look at your watch and go, oh, when's the train? When's this? I need to get home for work tomorrow morning. Exactly.
Yeah, no, I think that's quite a nice little segment there. I think there's things in there I hadn't thought about, especially with like the nighttime for safety of people as well. That hadn't crossed my mind at that as a reason, but it makes perfect sense. So with regards to, you touched on earlier, gongs, you're not a fan.
Not for me, no, not personally. I can totally see why people do them. And I think, they are a way to progress for people. If people sort of, absolutely smash a gong, they can progress quite quickly for things. You can get seen for other things. I think it depends on your style of comedy and, sort of what you do. So, I mean, for me, it's not my cup of tea, really. No. But I can completely see why people do it. And there are, people with particular styles of comedy that do really well at them. And I think, why not? If you want to have a go, and why not?
Yeah. What about competitions then in terms of just like the standard kind of competitions that are out there? Do you ever enter any of those and stuff?
Yeah, I've entered a few. I did So You'll Think You're Funny. I did that during COVID, and that was quite a random one because we had to do it on Zoom. So that was quite
fun.
But yeah, but that was all right. And yeah, I've done a few sort of new act competitions and things like that. I do competitions, but I don't sort of go into them with the expectation of like winning or doing well. And I think it's quite a good thing to go into it just as like a networking opportunity. I see it as like, I'm sticking my head above the parapet, see who's there and, see who I meet and whatever. So I do them occasionally, but I've started, because otherwise you just get like upset about, not winning things and you just think, oh no. I was in the final of a competition for the British Comedy Guide, and that was just after lockdown.
Okay.
I didn't win it, but I was in the final, so that was really fun. And we got to perform at the Museum of Comedy for the final, and that was really nice. That I didn't win it, but I came away from that having performed at a really lovely venue, having networked with a lot of people, and just having had a really nice night and a really nice time.
Oh, fair enough. What about jokes and joke writing and stuff like that? Yeah. What's your favourite joke you've come up with? How it came about?
Okay.
And has it changed? Have you refined it, or has it just stayed as it was when it first came out?
Okay, so my favourite joke. This is like saying who's your favourite child, isn't it? What's your favourite joke?
Nobody's going to get offended, though.
My favourite joke. I don't know. It keeps changing, but I'll go like one of the ones that I really enjoyed like making, and one of the ones that I still enjoy telling a lot, is like the Essex dad joke that I do.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a story about like a dad that I meet on a train platform in Essex, and like Essex style parenting. It came about from like a real experience I had on a train platform. And it's that thing of like people watching, and you just kind of pick stuff up. And, you know, he said this phrase, and I just thought, I've got to have that. I've got to, you know, you just think I cannot miss that. And like, do you want me to sort of explain the joke and sort of tell it?
Yeah, you can do if you want.
Yeah. So basically, like, I sort of tell the joke, and I basically tend to sort of start the set by telling people I'm from Essex and I'm an Essex girl, and we talk about all the stereotypes of an Essex girl. And then I say, okay, you know about Essex girls, but have you ever met an Essex dad? And then the audience sort of go, oh, okay. And then I go into this story, and basically I say, like, I was on a train platform in Basildon because I should be doing better with my life. And that's like the first part. And then, you know, there was this dad on the platform with his child, father-daughter, clearly exhausted after a long day of bonding in the local William Hill. And the toddler was screaming away in the buggy, and this dad didn't shout at her. What he did was he bent down and got really close to her and sort of fixed her in the eye like a Poundland Derren Brown.
Yeah.
And he just looked at her and he said, "Oi, you shut your mouth. You don't need nothing." And the child went silent, absolutely silent. She literally kind of sat there, and as if she was sort of thinking about it for a minute, like she was going, yeah, he's right, actually, I don't need nothing. And it was just amazing. And that was a real interaction that like I saw on a train platform, and I just thought, I can't ignore that. And it was it got a good laugh. And I used to get people sort of come up and like, you know, quote it back to me and say, you know, you shut your mouth at the end and things like that. So that was really nice. And yeah, it did evolve. I mean, like I added a few sort of like asides and things like the Basildon, I should be doing better with my life thing, and like Poundland Derren Brown. So you learn to add those bits in, and that quite often comes from like telling the joke. These sort of off the cuff things sneak in, and you go, oh, that got quite a good reaction actually. And that basically, I record all my sets. Every time I do a gig, I record it. I used to just record the audio, but now I actually film it as well, so I can actually look back at like my body language and things like that. But yeah, I recorded every single one, so then you can catch all those off the cuff things and go, oh, actually, I'll keep that in as a joke. Yeah, so it built over time. The main clump of it kind of arrived fully formed, but then there were a few off the cuff things that kind of snuck in that I kept because they got a good reaction. Yeah,
I think they're always the better ones as well, because they feel like they're more natural. Your brain hasn't really had to think about it; it's just done it in the moment, and then everything's kind of linked at that point in time. You've gone, yeah, works. Because I think that's the majority of us. I think are funnier when we're in a small group of people having a chat, and there's nothing rehearsed. You're just saying something, and something funny comes out, and you're like, that's something there, and then use that to develop from. So I don't know if that's how. I mean, when it comes to you sitting down and writing, do you sit down and write?
Yeah. So the answer to that is yes and no. I do write and I don't write. So, like in terms of ideas, like you said, a lot of the sort of really good ones that work tend to come quite fully formed. They sort of turn up in your mind quite fully formed. Basically, so my sort of first stage, like when I get an idea, is I put them in the notes app on my phone. So I've got in my notes app, I've got like a whole list of stuff labeled potential material, and it's just like when the idea comes to me, I type it down.
Yeah.
And that kind of sits in my phone. And then, so I've always got like an ongoing list of ideas in my phone that I kind of add to as when I get an idea. Like literally, if I'm in the supermarket and I think of something, I get my phone out, write it down. And you've got to write it down at the time that you have the idea, because you always go, oh yeah, I'll write that down later, and it's gone. You literally, the second you get the idea, write it down, have something, literally just type it, even, you know, like in the notes app on your phone, have something so you can just type it really quickly and then it's there. So I do that as like the initial stage. Then when I sort of actually get round to going, right, I'm going to write some new material, I'm going to sit down and do it, which, you know, at great pains, quite often I go, yeah, I'm going to write, and then I find any excuse to put it off. But when I actually sit down and do it, I will then pull that notes app up and I go through, and quite often it will be like a few weeks maybe since I've initially written that idea down, because then I think that's a good idea. That's like a good test of whether it's still funny.
Yeah.
Sometimes like write something down and you kind of leave it to sit for a bit, and see if it still works. If you come back to that 3 weeks after you've written it down and it still makes you laugh, that's good.
Yes.
Because otherwise, it kind of sorts a lot of the wheat from the chaff. Sometimes I look at something and I think, what the hell was I thinking when I wrote that? Why was I like, what, like iPhones for dogs? What was I thinking? What am I?
Yeah.
What was that idea at the time? So yeah, generally it'd be like write it down on my phone. A few weeks later, get the notes app back up. Things that still make me laugh, then I will then sort of pick an idea and go, right, I'm going to flesh that out on paper, and I physically write like notepad and pen and flesh it out. That then generally gets me like a very rough draft of a routine, and then I will probably take that to like a new material night or like somewhere like G&B. I love going to G&B to do my new stuff. And then, the first time you run it out is always going to be very rough and you're not really quite sure of what you're saying and what you're doing. But gradually it starts to take a form and it starts to take a shape. And it's funny sometimes the stuff that you write down on paper versus what actually comes out of your mouth. There's this weird thing, like, I don't know if you agree with this, like your mouth and your brain find a better way to say it in the moment quite often than what you've written on paper.
It's when it comes out of your mouth, it's natural.
Yeah.
It's not, it has the emphasis, it has everything to it. It's, if you send a text message to somebody, the emphasis isn't necessarily there. I know I should do it. I should write sets out word for word. I know I should, and I should learn it word for word. But then I find with myself is that it feels like it restricts me sometimes, in that I don't then feel natural on stage and I feel like I'm reciting, and then my brain just goes, right, the next bit is this, the next bit is this, the next words are this. And you then start getting myself into the habit of not waiting for the feedback from the audience and the joke, and not letting something sit for as long as it needs to sit. Whereas if I feel like I'm being natural and in the room and I've got bullets to go off of, it feels like it's better for me.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's probably not better for me, which is it's really contradictory in that potentially can stifle progress. I think if your type 5 or your type 7 or whatever isn't actually that tight, even though you think, I know the material, I know what I'm going to say, I just don't know how I'm going to say it yet until I'm actually on that stage. Whereas you get some people that can do they can get on, put the mask on, and they can run through it and it will sound as natural as anything.
Yeah.
But I find that really difficult if I'm trying to do it from word for word.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think bullet points or just having like key phrases, sometimes I will have like, I know that I want to get from this idea to this idea, and I don't have the exact sentence structure, but I know I want to end on that punchline. I know I need to end on the word barge, for example. I know I need to get to that word. So you kind of, the bit in the middle is kind of a bit woolly until you get to that end, and then you tend to sort of have like a strong beginning of the sentence, a strong end, and then the bit in the middle is a bit woolly. And over time, I guess the more you say it, you get into a pattern of knowing what goes in the middle. It's kind of,
you're doing the learning on the stage, and I think that's where the advice of doing as many gigs as you can in a small space of time allows you to repeat that same thing fresh in the memory of how it went yesterday, and your brain just goes, that bit didn't get as much of a laugh, let's put the emphasis on this, let's put a pause in there, let's look away, let's do whatever. And then you can gauge that reaction straight away. Whereas if you do it the next week, you've forgotten, because now you've gone through that phase of where you're now, okay, I've got to try and remember that set again, and you're reading through the notes, and you're at that point where you're just reading again. I don't know, everything just comes with time, experience, and stage time as well. Because I do say that as much as you come along and say, I've done 100 gigs, 100 5-minute sets is 500 minutes. It's not a lot of time.
No. And it's also, I think some of it is the quality thing of, is it 100 gigs where you've just been saying the same set over and over again with no change? Is that going to help you versus doing 20 where you're tweaking? And exactly. So that's the thing. I think the numbers thing can sometimes be a bit arbitrary in my opinion. Sometimes 100 gigs is great if you've used that time wisely. Exactly. Yeah. And I think like Kyle said before on here, like if you do a clump and you do like 3 together, if you can't gig very often, do like 3 or whatever in a clump, and the learning process is quicker. It's the quality of the learning rather than just saying the same thing over and over again. Yeah, exactly. And that is the thing. Like, I've noticed when I have done 3 or 4 gigs, like one day after another, I notice it. You notice it by gig 3 or gig 4. You notice it's tightened up literally like overnight. Somehow overnight it's got better. You do notice it. Whereas if it's like one a week, you do kind of feel like you're going back to the beginning again each time. You do actually feel it.
Yeah. I think it's true. So what if somebody was to come up to you to a gig and say, I'm really thinking about doing it, I like what you do, what advice, one piece of single advice?
One piece of advice.
Just one.
I can't give you 2. I'll give you 1. Okay. Right. So this is for someone who hasn't done it yet and they're thinking of doing it, but they're not sure. I would say, because this is what I had to get into my mind, give yourself permission to do it.
Okay.
Don't wait for somebody else to say, you're good at this, you should try this. If you've got that inkling, if you want to do it, give yourself permission to do it. Give yourself permission to be silly, if that makes sense. Like, give yourself permission to be a bit of a tit for 5 minutes on stage. It's fine. Because especially if you've got like a really serious day job, or you've got a job that's completely removed from comedy, it can be quite difficult to kind of think, you know what, I could try this. I could be that person. And I was like the very quiet, studious person, and I always felt like, no, I'm too sensible for this, I can't get away with doing this. And even if you do it once, you can do it, like you say, you don't even have to tell anyone that you're doing it. You don't have to announce that you're doing it. You can go and do 1 gig and see how it goes. If it's terrible, you don't have to do it again. If it's great, you keep going. But it's some of it is like a psychological thing of give yourself permission to try.
I like that. Give yourself permission to do it. That's quite good. It's quite a nice little phrase. Allow yourself to be free. The one thing I always find funny is when somebody says to you, oh, you're really brave. It's like, it's not brave. It's not. There's there's people going to war in this world. There's people that are dealing with anything. Like if they work in healthcare and stuff, they're dealing with everything going on around them. They're brave to be turning up to work. We're not brave for standing on stage trying to be funny for 5 minutes. That's not brave in the real sense of it.
That's the thing. That's something that I mentioned in one of my routines, actually, is that when quite often, like after a gig, if people come up to you and say, oh, you're brave, they don't actually mean you're brave. What it is, that's probably someone that knows you who's coming up and going, oh, you're brave for thinking that you're funny. It's that thing. It's code for, oh, you're shit.
Yeah, there is that.
But I know what you mean exactly. Like when people do say that, oh, you're brave thing, you do sort of think, well, in the grand scheme of like everything, compared to like, emergency workers and doctors and nurses and, like people going to war, literally, it's not, it's just fun. We're just messing about. I guess it's bravery in the sense of you're kind of crossing that line into going, I think I can do this. I think it's bravery in the sense of having the confidence to think you might be good.
Yeah, there is that, I guess.
But yeah, it is a funny thing when people say, oh, you're brave, because it's you do think, really? I'm not. I'm just messing about on a stage. I'm talking about, like Essex dads and stuff like that. It doesn't feel like bravery in that sense.
No. So what's your ambitions for the future then in comedy? Because did I see something, you went up to the Fringe last year?
Yeah.
To how and do a few spots there and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm obviously going to keep going doing the comedy. I'd love to try and sort of, it even sounds cringy saying it, but like I'd love to like make a living from it. Yeah. I know it's very difficult to do, but I would love to be in a position where I can do more comedy and do it all the time. Yeah, I think things like Edinburgh and like going to Edinburgh. At some point I would like to like go and do a show and like do an hour somewhere. I'm probably not at that point yet. I think I need to sort of I can write, like a good 10 or 15 minutes. I need to, to write like an hour that's like a good hour. I think it takes a long time. So yeah, I would love to at some point, do an hour show and take it somewhere, whether that's Edinburgh or somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Going to try and keep going and do longer sets. Yeah, see where it goes.
Yeah, cool. Everybody's ambitions are different in this. And I think if you say to a stranger, I do comedy, they immediately think, oh, that's what you do. That's your job. It's like, no, it's kind of like I'm not sure if hobby's ever the right word.
Yeah.
It's a little sideline. And sideline that makes up for what you probably do for the rest of the day kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It's such you can't describe it exactly. You can't sort of pinpoint it accurately because it's obviously not your job at this point, but hobby doesn't feel like quite the right word. It feels like it slightly sort of trivializes it a bit sometimes.
Yeah.
How would you describe it? Yeah, it's a difficult thing. I know people, use the phrase like, oh, it's my passion project and things like that. But I mean, I suppose you could describe it like that. I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of like a creative outlet.
I mean, to anybody outside, it almost is like it's a little bit of a hobby, but it's a hobby that you do have to put time and effort into and stuff like that. But it's an all-encompassing, all-consuming. And you start looking at things when you watch comedy now.
Yeah.
You start, I don't know about you, I start critiquing it in my head.
Yes, yeah.
And going, that even when you watch professionals on TV and you see how they do certain things and that deliberate pause. I've started watching a YouTube channel by a guy called Comedy Zola. Okay. And if anybody's not watched it, they probably haven't. Go ahead, watch it. And what he does is he critiques artists and stuff and what they do. And he did a really interesting one about Dave Chappelle doing a Saturday Night Live recently. And the way he told a joke and then he just stood or sat there motionless and let the audience just catch up and allowed it to breathe. And those little things, you kind of start seeing them from the professionals and go, that's the difference. It's not, their joke writing may not be the best, but their joke delivery makes their jokes the best.
Yeah, it's delivery and it's stagecraft, isn't it? Exactly. And it's watching something like that where someone's completely still. It's that thing where they have got the conviction, they've got the belief, they've got the experience to back them up. They know if they stand here and they stay still, it's going to get the reaction that it deserves. They know they've got that conviction that only comes from doing it countless times and knowing that it will work. To watch someone, like that, and you actually start to analyze what they do, and you can see the difference between someone who's done loads of gigs and someone who hasn't, or you can watch a show and you because you've obviously done it, you know, okay, maybe that wasn't how they meant the joke to go. That's you like someone like a sort of a normal audience member will go, oh, that was funny, but you're kind of watching it going, that wasn't the joke they meant to tell. They're kind of trying to catch up and things like that. You do kind of get to peek behind the curtain a bit.
The education behind the whole comedy thing is as interesting as performing it, I think, sometimes. And you just see how some people act, and you look at a joke and you go, that's the reason that was funny, and the audience member's just enjoying it anyway. But you're going, no, that's what they've done there, that turn, that pause, that wait, that comment, whatever it was. You realise how good some people are is when they're on the stage and they're doing their bit and they interact with a member of the crowd, for example, and then they go straight back into doing their set as if it was nothing. But then they go back to that member of the crowd 15 minutes later, and the brain is almost like divided into like 6 or 7 different parts, and it's going, right, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, and then no, we need to refer back to that, and they'll fit in with here. And I don't know. I'd love to be able to get to that stage where you can start messing about but being consistent with sets and stuff like that.
Yeah, that thing of like creating like a narrative arc of the night, exactly, where you're going back to people that you spoke to before and things like that, exactly. And being at that level, exactly. Like I heard James Acaster talking about something where he was talking about like when he started and when he sort of was gigging more and getting better and getting more experienced, and he said like he knew that he was confident in his material and he was getting better as a comedian when he could start like editing the set mentally while he was performing it on stage. And it's that thing of, you've got like part of your brain is just like in performance mode going, and the other half is actually editing as you go, and having that confidence of knowing that you know this material well enough that you can edit it as you go. And knowing that the performance side of things, you're so versed in it and you know it so well that you can do that and also be kind of thinking of something else. It's this thing. Now, this is sort of a theory I read. There's this thing about competence. They talk about like conscious competence. Okay. I don't know if you've heard of this. So this is like when you learn a skill, you start off by being, I think they call it unconsciously incompetent.
Okay.
Which means that you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And it's basically like it's when you either know nothing about the subject, or you kind of never encountered it before. It's basically like the stage where you haven't learned anything about a topic, so you've never tried it, you don't know if you're going to be any good at it or not. And they say people generally in that category think that a task is either incredibly easy or that it's going to be incredibly difficult. If you're like unconsciously incompetent, then you sort of get to a stage where they call it conscious incompetence, which sounds bad, but it's actually a good thing. It's where you've started doing the activity and you kind of know which bits you can do and which bits are difficult.
Yeah.
So that's what they call conscious incompetence. It's where something feels difficult because you've tried it. Probably like the first time you've done a set, like the first time you've ever done a gig, you reach a level of what they call conscious incompetence, which is where you know what you don't know. You're aware that you can do this, but there are bits you need to work on. Then you get to the next level, which is conscious competence, which is where you're good at the thing and you know that you're good at the thing, but you have to kind of try hard to be good at the thing. So you kind of get to a point where, like, you know, you're doing well, but you have to be fully on it to be doing well all the time. And then they said the next level up from that is what they call unconscious competence, which is that point where you get so good at something that you start doing it without thinking about it.
Yeah.
And you get to that point where it doesn't feel like a skill anymore. And you're just kind of doing it. And they did say, like, the danger with that is that quite often you then forget you've learned something as a skill because you kind of do it automatically. I guess it's like when you learn to drive and eventually you just drive without thinking about it. You don't think about, you know, changing the gear or whatever, you just do it. So you get to a point with something where you're so good at it that you do it without thinking about it. And you almost kind of forget the effort it took you to learn that skill. So it's an interesting thing. That's sort of what I'd like to do with my comedy. I'm probably still at the incompetent stage, but you know, like, you do get comedians who they can just do it on stage, and like one part of them is performing, the other part's editing, and they're just not even thinking. They're not even thinking about it.
Okay, so if you got to that stage,
if I was competent at something, if I was good.
And things start going really well, and you end up being asked to do a live at the Apollo or a Netflix thing, and you sit down and produce, and they ask you, what music would you like to walk out to? What do you choose?
Okay. So, this is something I had to kind of think about, because there's a piece of music that I kind of instinctively said I would use that one. I'm not sure if it goes with my, like, stage persona, though, but I do like it, and I think it would be good, like, to blare out, because it's got to be something that's got, like, a really good lick to it, that when you blast it out in a room like the Apollo, it's going to sound really good. So the bit of music I kind of instinctively went for is Lonely Boy by the Black Keys.
Okay.
Because it's got like a really good like guitar riff at the beginning, and then it like hits the keys, and it's got like a really great opening. So I think that's something. It's kind of like a slightly more kind of rock soul sound, which I don't know if it really goes with my stage persona, but it's just like it's a piece of music that I think, you know, it's like a really great one to sort of like hype you up before you go on.
Yeah.
So I would probably go with that.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
As we're kind of on the fun questions, any regular listeners will know what's coming up. Okay. I like to set the comedians, every comedian that comes on to here, a challenge to tell a joke on stage from this joke book called The Little Book of Shit Jokes by Sid Finch, where all the comedians get to pick a joke from this book, but I don't get to pick it by words. I get to pick it by page number. So it's completely random. I have no idea what's going to come out. So if you want to take part in this, give me a number between 5 and 95. But I will caveat that we've had 50 odd episodes so far. So there's going to be there is some pages have more than one joke. So we are okay, but we'll keep going until we find a joke.
Okay. Right. So we'll start off 79.
70. Aha, first time.
Okay, right. Okay, hit me with it. What is it?
Right,
oh,
okay. Let me have a quick... Okay, yeah. This actually kind of fits in with part of your intro. The joke I'd like you to tell on stage, you can change it however you want, but you'll kind of get the rough gist. The manager says, our new signing costs 30 million. I call him our wonder player. The interviewer says, is he that good? The manager replies, no. But whenever I see him play, I wonder why I bought him.
Okay. That's quite a long one. Okay.
It is quite a long one, so you can make it a bit more succinct if you want to.
Okay. No, that's fine. That could work. Okay. That could work. I might have to change it into like the third person.
Yeah.
But that could work with something. It could.
The idea is always that the premise stays the same, but it can. I've said it before that if the joke goes on a bit too long or whatever, shorten it and it make it a bit more succinct. Or if the joke talks about, my uncle did this or whatever, and you've got a bit in your set that's about your brother or your sister or whatever, change it. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It's just a bit of fun, and it's nice to see how people can weave these in.
Yeah,
if they can weave them in at all.
Okay, right. I shall give that a go. Yes. Okay.
I'll send you the full joke in a message, so you've got it there, and use it whenever you see fit. And then film everything, film it and tag us in it, and we'll share it about as well, and have a laugh at everyone's efforts.
There we go. Yeah,
there's a few out there and stuff like that, so it's all good. It's all good fun and good natured.
Excellent.
But it's probably not a good thing to keep in a set long term.
Yeah, if I'm doing a type 5 and that takes up like 2 minutes of the type 5, it's not good. Okay, I will pick up the gauntlet. I will do it. That's good.
Cool. Lastly, where can people find you then?
So I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram at Frantic Typist on Instagram. Amber Phillips at Frantic Typist. If you're not on Instagram, I also just have like a website as well, amberphillipscomedy.com. That's Phillips with 2 L's. And you can sort of see my reels and stuff on Instagram. If you go on my website or my Linktree thing, I also randomly did a sketch comedy podcast just over lockdown. But I basically sort of locked myself in my room over lockdown and did like silly voices into a microphone and put it on the internet. So that's on my website. It's on my Linktree. So you can get to all of that on my Instagram. So if you like sketch comedy stuff, I've got a little podcast I did there. Basically find me on Instagram at Frantic Typist.
Okay. You can find us on Instagram too at Open Mic Comedy Pod. We've got a website, openmiccomedypod.com. Whichever platform you're listening to this on, please give it a like, follow, subscribe, and all of that. Helps us get us up the charts and gets these people heard. Lastly, just want to say thank you very much for your time today, Amber.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Good. And for everybody else, I will speak to you all very, very soon.